Good morning. I'll call the Crow Wing County Budget Committee for November 12th, 2020 to order. Nick, we will look for you for a lengthy presentation today.
Lengthy? Oh no. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Today we're going to go review, we're going to start off with a CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Fund update. We are starting to get information in. We actually have quite a bit from the for-profit side. And still waiting on some of the nonprofit entities to get their documentation into us. Their deadline that United Way gave was yesterday. Tyler from Bladec gave Tuesday as their deadline. So we're going to start reviewing that later today and tomorrow and next week to start going through what expenses did they submit that qualify and start working that process forward. Hopefully, everybody submits its documentation and everything is good. Some of the examples I've seen so far, it's a $10,000 grant. They've submitted $100-some thousand worth of qualified expenses. So I think majority of them are going to go well over the $10,000 just to make the point that they have more than enough expenses to get the grant. Local municipalities have started sending their money back in. They have until the 20th to get us their funding that they did not spend back into our coffers. Once it's here, we are free to use it for our own needs. At this point, most of that will most likely be qualified for public safety and offsetting the payroll in that section. We aren't absolutely certain how much we're getting back from everybody. A few cities and municipalities have told us that they expect money to be left over. We have a number that didn't give us any numbers. So after the 20th, we'll have a better picture of what we're getting back. Any of the remaining funds that are in there right now, our current status is that we have about $1.351 million that is not allocated or spent. That includes money that was left over for the grant program. That includes the $1 million unallocated funds. We also have another thing hanging out there with the broadband picture. CTC has not provided invoicing yet, unless you've seen anything, Tim? From CTC?
I'm sorry,
have you seen anything from CTC for broadband?
No.
So at this point, we don't know where they're at with that either. Tim has made multiple efforts to reach out to them to let them know that we need to get invoicing sooner than later so that we know what is going to go towards broadband and what will not.
Are they required, Nick, to get their invoicing in before that December 1st timeline?
Yes, by Minnesota Management and Budget's guidelines, we have to have the money physically spent by December 1st.
Okay.
If we don't have it spent, it does not qualify. Luckily, we have the presumptive eligibility for public safety that will allow us to eat up whatever's remaining towards that. It's well over $8 million worth of public safety expenses for payroll over the course of the pandemic qualifying period from March through the end of November. So we have more than enough to retain that portion. Mm-hmm. It's important for us to retain that, one, for a little bit of a fund balance build in anticipation that we're going to have additional expenses going forward. We're going to want to retain this money so that we can continue responding to the pandemic with this funding source rather than going straight to levy. Obviously, once this money is gone, we're going to have to continue responding, but this will help us offset some of that going forward.
Yeah, and Nick, I understand CTC is working on those broadband projects already too, currently.
Yes, I actually live in one of the areas that they chose, and everything is buried in our area, so they are making significant progress in them. We just haven't seen invoicing from them yet.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Coring.
So let me get this straight. So we haven't sent out any checks, that $10,000 checks to the nonprofits or the for-profits. So they have, excuse me. So now they have to submit eligible expenses before we send out the check for $10,000. Is that correct?
Correct, because at this point, we have to have documentation showing what those expenses were in order for us to make sure that they qualify under CARES guidance so that we don't end up having to repay those funds back to the state or to the federal government in the future. So
they have to have those that documentation in to you by when?
The documentation was supposed to be in by either yesterday or Tuesday. We are probably going to allow a little bit of flexibility with that, with help from Kim from United Way and Tyler from Bladek. But
Okay,
the sooner we have them, the easier it is for us to validate that everything's there. Staff will be working on that next week in order to get through everything that's there. We will have to do some spot audits to ensure that we have receipts to back up everything that they're submitting, so that when our single audit comes in the spring, we have all the proper documentation in place that we don't end up with either a audit comment or owing money back to the federal or the state government.
so one more question, Mr. Chair. So how did these profits or nonprofits, how did they know that they're supposed to send this documentation in? I'm guessing that a lot of people haven't sent in the documentation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, the Bladek and United Way actually communicated with them, as well as our original documentation that we sent out in the application,
Okay.
that they would have to provide a summary of all the expenses that qualified, and we did provide an Excel spreadsheet that allowed them to know the types of categories that qualified and to put their information in there to submit back to us.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, any other questions on CARES Act or coronavirus relief funds and our current status with those?
Go ahead.
After we complete reviewing all of these items, we will bring that back to Budget Committee in December to give an update on how much we actually spent for each individual area, and hopefully have a summary of who actually submitted documentation, what dollar amounts they all received.
Excellent.
Next on the agenda is departmental fees. The first page in the packet that I handed out, and I apologize, Commissioner Coring, I only sent you the first page, which is the summary of the proposed changes. After the meeting, I'll send out to everybody a complete listing of all the fee schedules that are proposed. This year, we did ask the budget, or the business managers in each departmental area to do a full cost analysis of each of their fees. Each department did accomplish that. The only one that had significant fluctuations in what the costs were was in highway, but they're proposing no changes because the majority, if not all, of the fees that they are charging are offsets to things that benefit us for our roadways, including mailbox supports that get them up so we don't hit the mailbox, culverts and approaches to make sure drainage is appropriate and everything else. So they're proposing no changes on theirs, and we'll go through that here in a second. If in the packet, I provided all of the actual fee schedules for each department. This is not their full costing analysis. If you do want to have information on that, we can get you some more information on that. It just has a lot of formulas, and it gets to be pretty big spreadsheets for some of the departments. So it just is a little information overkill. For community services, they're proposing only to add a $25 charge for instant urine analysis field test. This charge is for the probation agents conducting a urine analysis out in the field. Outside of that, they had no proposed changes. Majority of what they have is either set in statute in their fees or is minimal cost to us. Any questions on community services fees? For financial services, we had two areas that the cost significantly changed for us. One is audit verifications. At this point, we're proposing no changes. We may update that next year. With the new tax system, it involves a lot more time for us to complete that audit verification. So the cost jumped dramatically. We're charging $130. Our cost is around $150. But we feel that at this point, it's because we don't understand the system well enough, and we want to give it time to see if we can bring that back in line as we learn more and more about that system. The other item that increased was our cost to administer the commercial pesticide applicator licensing. We are proposing a $15 increase to this, bringing it up to $119 rather than the $104 that it is at now. Of this, $64 goes to the state, the other $55 is for us. It does take us more time to sit and watch these people complete the exam, So we did ask to push that to $55 for our portion from the original $45. Our cost is about $52.34 right now in staff time. Any questions on financial services?
Mr. Chair, if I can, now these licensing permits, are you going to cover those separately? You know, for like the liquor license and that?
All of those are either at the minimum that we can charge or at the maximum. They're all based on statutory established rates.
Okay.
There are no proposed changes for any of the liquor license fees.
Now, again, with this COVID situation, we deferred those, or we allowed them?
In the spring, we did defer some. We did provide relief on some of those. That may continue next year, but I would suggest that we bring that as we go through that,
Yeah, okay.
that process, that we keep our fee schedule at the regular rates and approach that outside of the actual schedule itself.
Well, we may not see the income coming from this if we make that decision.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Debbie.
one thing to keep in mind, Commissioner Brecken, is that the license period in Crow Wing County runs from July 1st to June 30th. So in the last licensing period, which is where we offered the relief, as well as a reduction on what their renewal was from July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. Okay. So we can always look at additional relief in the next licensing period, or even within this same licensing period another time. But those are the fees that will be applicable starting with July of 2021.
Okay. Thank you.
Next in the list is the GIS fee schedule. Here we are proposing no new changes. These fees are the same as 2020. In land services, they are proposing, or there are a few administrative things on page, can't remember which page this is on. Find it here eventually. Go back to this piece. Under recording fees, they are updating the per month subscription fee title to remove the word Landshark from it. We no longer use that software. So they are requesting to remove that. So administrative change. They're also looking to change the title of day use to 24-hour access. And they're also requesting to remove the certificate of title fee of $2. They don't feel that there's a need for that charge any longer. In environmental services section, under the short-term rental license portion, last year we established a one-time or a one flat fee rate of $300 per property. They are proposing to have a tiered system based on bedrooms, as it was discussed in the establishment of that ordinance. So a 2-bedroom or less short-term rental will have $200 fee. A 3 to 4 bedroom will see a $300 fee. 5 to 6 bedroom, $400 fee, and 7+ bedroom, a $500 fee. Any questions
Mr.
on
Chair?
that?
Commissioner Coring, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I guess I didn't understand that. I'm just looking at it right now. It says adjust short-term rental. Oh, okay. I guess now I understand it. So what it was before was a flat $300 fee, and now it's kind of a scaled. So they're not going to pay $300 plus $200, correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, that is correct. They will not charge a $300 flat fee plus an additional fee. It will be, if you have 2-bedroom or less, you will see a $200 fee.
And that's from January 1st until the end. So that's for the entire year, correct?
Correct, for the calendar year.
Okay. And then if they have multiple properties, obviously it's a fee for every property, correct?
That is my understanding, correct?
And then can you what are the, actually I had somebody from out by Garrison that called me yesterday and asked me, he says, what do I get for that? And I honestly couldn't give him an answer. He says, do I have to have my sewer inspected? is somebody going to come out and inspect the property? And I said, I don't think so. What are they going to get for that $200? It's kind of like taxation without any representation. I don't know. What do they get for that?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, I honestly don't know. I believe that would be best answered by Land Services in what is all
Okay.
required in that ordinance, unless, Tim, you have?
Tim, nothing from you? I guess I can just ask Gary, I guess.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Commissioner Coring, I believe that it is really that we get to know where the vacation rentals are, the short-term rentals are, so that if indeed they caused a problem, we have the owner's name, we have the owner of record, we have contact information. We also will accumulate any complaints that we get, which becomes one of the data points that you would use to decide to not renew someone's license if they're causing a lot of problems in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So I think that was a good question, Commissioner Coring, and I think that Gary should clarify that even further. So I appreciate that question. I think we should know what these fees are actually driving. So thank you.
Well, that's,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that's the whole thing. I mean, the fees that we have now, you can see that Nick is adjusting some different fees and saying, oh, we don't think we need to charge this fee anymore, or we need to raise the fee up a little more to cover the cost of, I guess, staff time. So I guess obviously, I'm not in favor of this at all. And I guess the guy that called me yesterday asked me right out, he says, well, what am I getting for this? And I said, I don't know. I said, call Land Services. But so I just, I don't know. I guess enough said.
Okay, Commissioner Hoag?
Well, when we compare it to the same type of what you get when you buy a liquor license, a tobacco license, you get the ability to operate your business. I mean, we could go down all of these fees where it's a permit to operate. This would fall, I think, under that same category. It's a business and it's your permit to operate. You can't open up a liquor store or a tobacco store without these necessary permits either. So as Tim refers to, it's the ability to keep control over the businesses that we allow in our county.
Good point.
Mr.
right.
Chair,
Yes.
that does make sense. I guess I would further on that. Let's say this is just a hypothetical. Here I said that I was gonna, now once I was reelected, I was gonna kind of be real quiet and not say much, but I guess that's not in my DNA. So I guess a question that I have, and Gary's not there, so kind of talking, but let's say I was gonna start a 20-unit motel down here. Well, I wonder if would Crow Wing County require a fee to run a motel every year? I don't know. I guess it's just a thought off the top of my head, but nobody needs to answer it. I just still can't see when you have somebody that has it's their personal property. But I guess in a way it is kind of a business. So,
Mr. Chair.
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Coring's question, I will answer your question for you. If you had a 20-unit motel, you'd have to be licensed to the state. So the state handles that level of lodging, which is what we've had the conversation around with the VRBO piece, is if you do have that type of a unit or that type of a lodging structure, you are licensed and required to meet a bunch of criteria from the state standpoint of things. The VRBO, we should have some of those same type of knowledge of what businesses are operating in that area.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Deb, for that. And Mr. Chair, can I ask for one more thing?
Sure.
I guess I personally would like to have Gary or Land Services Department put together like a one-page, I don't know if you call it a cheat sheet, but a sheet that kind of says what explains what this new licensing fee the reason for it, and then the requirements. And I don't know if they have to have their sewer inspected every 3 years. And it'd be good to know if somebody's going to come out and inspect that property and inspect to see if they have fire extinguishers, fire detectors, smoke detectors. I guess I'd like to have that, because I did receive one call already. I'm assuming I'll probably get more calls as this moves forward. So I'd like to at least be able to answer my constituents in a somewhat intelligent way. If we could do that, thanks.
So Nick, if you'll just pass that on to Gary, let him know. Tim will.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can too, is that in the bonding bill, it was also passed that the short-term vacation rentals will be taxed, and it'll be similar, I believe, to a bed and breakfast. So part of this, again, will help us as a county identify who those businesses are that are operating as bed and breakfasts, or
Good.
short-term vacation rental.
All right, any
Okay.
further on that one? They're also proposing some changes in the solid waste section under mattress recycling fees. Gary did ask that we don't necessarily focus on those today because they are coming up tomorrow for discussion in the solid waste committee to see what that rate will be. So I will update everybody after they meet and determine what rates they would like to be and send that out to everybody. In your packet, it's listed as to be determined at this point. And that is every update for land services. Next on our list is the Highway Department. Highway Department is proposing no changes. As I said, their costs do exceed what they charge. This has been a normal practice for the Highway Department for multiple years, as all of these services actually provide a benefit to our roadway system. So this is to encourage people to actually apply for the permit and get the proper drainage for a approach in particular, or actually purchase the mailbox posts so that we have the swing-aways at every entrance. So they are proposing no changes, just to make sure that people continue to apply for the permits and purchase these items through us. Sheriff's Office did a full review as well. They also are proposing no changes. They didn't have anything that drastically changed pricing-wise for any of their items. Those are all of the proposed fees. The plan is to bring all the fee schedules to the December 15th meeting, I believe it is, as that is a open forum for people to, for the public to comment on our fee schedules.
Okay.
Next on our list are our policies. We typically review about half of our policies every single year. This year, there are 5 that are on the docket for review. We are bringing only 3 to you today. The budget policy is going through a full revamp, including a change to the amendment procedures and policies around the amendments. This is to help staff better understand what is necessary for an amendment to come before the board, and also to add a few additional items that impact our budget but aren't put through the amendment process. So that one will be coming in at a future date. We also have the procurement policy that is actually in a continuous improvement project. So that one is not finalized yet either. And that one's actually taking a lot longer than anticipated. There's some technology pieces that we're trying to implement to help people better understand that the requirements around procurement. A lot of staff struggle with when they need to start getting bids, when do you need to have 3 bids, and so we're trying to help clarify that and give a step-by-step system that tells them exactly what is necessary for bidding in particular. First on the list for review is the asset management policy. There are a few minimal changes or small changes to the wording in it for financial services. Everything is described as finance department or finance staff. We're just modifying those to be financial services division or financial services staff. That's across all 3 of these policies. One of the first big changes under procedures, section E, on page 3, we're actually proposing changing the replacement of emergency equipment or assets that are damaged in an accident and we get MCIT funds, moving that from the county board to the administrator having the authority to allow us to utilize additional CIP funds to be able to replace those pieces of equipment, and coming back to board to inform you that those things occurred. A lot of this comes down to just the timeliness of trying to get assets back into play, especially in the sheriff's office. If they roll a vehicle, MCIT doesn't give us enough money to pay for the whole vehicle. We are hoping that the administrator has the authority to utilize CIP funds to purchase that asset, and then we can come back to board and just update you that that was accomplished. Any questions on that one in particular?
Any questions?
Okay.
Hearing none.
We also added into the asset management policy on page 5, transfer and disposal. This section is just to bring the asset management policy in line with the fleet vehicle and equipment replacement policy. So this just ties us to the two policies together so that we have similar language amongst the two.
Questions? Next.
Okay. Next on the list is the internal control policy. This is one of our shortest policies and is scheduled for the next round, going through a complete overhaul. This one is one that I would like to see extended and greatly improved from what it is. But at this point, the only changes that we're proposing in this one is changing finance department or finance staff to financial services division. So minimal change, and it's all administrative changes to that policy. The next one on the list is your accounting, auditing, and financial reporting policy. We did add a word change or addition in section, I think V is 5. I struggle with my Roman numerals. To add custodial funds, this is a response to GASB 84 requiring us to now report custodial funds separately from our fiduciary funds. So this is just updating the policy to show that that will be in our financial reports.
Nick,
Yep.
will you just explain to them a little bit about what custodial funds are so they're all aware?
The easiest way to explain custodial fund is if we have a joint powers agreement with an outside agency and together we are managing the funds, that's a custodial fund. It gets much more complicated and there's a lot of decision making that has to occur to determine whether it's fiduciary, a custodial, but the easiest is any joint power where we are joint managing funds or the outside agency is managing the funds but we're holding them, those fall under that custodial fund.
So is MHB an example of that?
MHB is part of this, I can't remember if that's in that list. I'd have to pull out our financial report to remember who was all in there. Corey and Emily took care of majority of that for me last year, so I tend to forget of our 300 some pages worth of financial reports which ones fell under that category, and there was a lot of back and forth with the auditors on what did fall under a custodial and what fell under fiduciary. So I can definitely get you that, what our examples are.
So I know Central Minnesota EMS, which I attend, Stearns County holds the custodial dollars because that's an agreement, as you said. So that's kind of a custodial fund for them.
Yep.
Yep.
Any questions on policies? I believe typically these come in consent, Tim?
Once they've been reviewed here, yes.
So these will come before you again and consent agenda at the next meeting.
Okay. Very good.
All right. I was told I'm supposed to drag this out and they were going faster than I'm allowed. Financial status update. We did a forecast for SMT late last week and early this week. just to backtrack a little bit, I'm getting messages from my staff downstairs. MHB is a custodial fund, as are all of our lake improvement districts. So back to this. We did a projection on what our fund balance build and usage will be for the end of 2020. These are very rough numbers. It sounds strange to say that we have 2 months left and we don't know very well how those 2 months are going to play out and what impact that will have. But a lot can happen in 2 months, especially in our community services area. One child getting placed out of state can have a significant impact on what we see for fund balance build. With that in mind, we are anticipating approximately a $5.9 million fund balance build for 2020. That, again, is a very rough number. It is very dependent on a multitude of different items playing out exactly as we budgeted for November and December. It's taking how we've performed through the end of October and then taking budgetary numbers for November and December to calculate that final number. For the general fund, we anticipate around $2.4 million in fund balance growth. Majority of that is due to staffing. In the sheriff's office, we've seen significant decreases in the amount of expenses we're spending on staff. Their overtime has dropped. They have been understaffed for quite some time and struggling to replace those staff members. So that has had a positive impact on us financially. We've also seen some savings in the jail. Even though we're not getting the revenue, the expense side, we're seeing savings in food costs and other items. So between majority of it sits there and a little bit in the other areas, including land services, we expect about a $2.4 million increase in fund balance there. Highway Department had a scheduled fund balance usage. We anticipate that to be much higher than what they planned. They planned for a $300,000 usage. We are forecasting $2.2 million fund balance usage. There are some items out there for municipalities on joint projects to reimburse us. Approximately $900,000 are sitting out there to be collected. That will impact that. That could move it closer to that 1.3 mark. A lot of this comes down to some projects that came to us throughout the year, a bridge and some items that came out of local option sales tax. The majority of this impact we'll be seeing in the local option sales tax side, not on the levy-based side. Community services, a very bright spot for us this year, $3.8 million expected fund balance build. A lot of this comes down to that out-of-home placement and those other programs for the adults and for the children that are seeing significant reductions in costs due to the fact that we aren't placing people and doing as much of that this year. Now, at the SMT meeting, I was reminded that there is one child that's out there that may see a significant impact to our expense side because they will have to be placed out of state. So this can change drastically in a very short period of time. We really hope that we can stay at this point. Cash flow wise, at the end of October, there were $2.2 million in the hole. So this will really help us get towards that end goal of being positive again. Hopefully, things pan out. Our capital projects fund, thanks to the frozen projects and to a little bit of other savings in a few particular areas, we anticipate $500,000 worth of fund balance growth there as well. This will help us get back to zero. Our fund balance is dangerously low in Fund 43. We did have negative cash flows throughout this year in that fund. So this will help us get back to zero. And then there's some further conversation to be had about what to do with our CIP projects for 2021 to help us rebuild that fund balance there as well. We also anticipate about $1.3 million in fund balance build from COVID. The CRF funds that are in excess of what we have physically spent will be captured, like I said earlier, in the public safety presumptive eligibility, and that will be fund balance build. So the total of all those is $5.9 million. So COVID has created a lot of challenges for us, but it has also put a lot of areas within our organization into a position where expenses did not get to the level that we anticipated. especially with us being able to move the expenses that we incurred because of COVID over to the federal funding source that's significantly supported us in hopefully getting to this point. Any questions on fund
Mr. Chair,
balances?
if I can, you said we're building on our fund balance. How close are we getting back, we get, in regards to the deficiencies that we were experiencing, getting back to the minimum level that we should be at?
We still have a long ways to go. It's still going to take us multiple years to build out of this. All of these increases will have a significant impact in the right direction, but we don't have a forecast for how quickly that's going to help us get back.
Administrator Houle.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Brecken, our original target was about 12 million. And so if we can eke out of 2020 operations a $5 million growth, and right now we're projecting 5.9, but if we can get 5, then you may recall we had discussions about the CIP for next year and whether or not we should have a full CIP program. My current thinking is that I would be thinking along the lines of trying to dedicate an additional 2 million of the 4.3 million in CIP for 2021, so that we would see a $7 million fund balance build in those 2 operational years. That would be a significant down payment. Then our $1 million per year fund balance build that is built into the existing budget, which would continue then year after year, would get us the rest of the way. It's not important that we get there overnight. It's important that we know how we're going to get there and when we're going to get there.
So we'd be looking at about 5 years then to get there.
Any other questions on the fund balance projection?
It's a quiet group.
Quiet group. Cash flows is another item that we continue to look at. At the end of October, our total available cash flows was sitting at 7.1 million. This is much improved over 2019. That does take into account backing the revenue from the CARES Act out. So we are in a much better position cash flow wise. Our goal is to forecast that out and see if we will still be in a good position come next spring when we hit our April low for available cash, and then our June low of our April low for the bank, our June low for available cash. If we find that we are in a good position, we'll start moving back towards investing the CDs that we called and left into our money market management, our money market account, and try and get better returns on those. Staff just got this updated this morning, so it's a forecast that we'll have to work on over the coming weeks to determine what we can do going forward.
That's pretty good news, though.
It's very good news. It's a lot better than what I anticipated.
Mr. Chair, a question I've got, Nick, too, is that we're going to have to be finalizing the levy next month. And we, our high preliminary was, what, 5.89?
4.97.
Okay, 4.97, okay. Is there been any changes to that, and especially with the building fund balance and with the COVID and covering some of the other expenses?
At our 4.97, we are already anticipating utilizing fund balance in order to deliver the 4.97. The sheriff's office, seeing a greatly reduced revenue stream from the jail, has a pretty significant impact on us, and we are anticipating taking half of that cost against fund balance for 2021. We also have the 27th payroll that is hitting us that we are taking towards the fund balance as well. So at this point, with 4.97, we already have almost $1 million worth of fund balance usage programmed. So my recommendation would be that we'd leave it at the 4.97 and use this as our way to continue to try and maintain a low levy going forward, rather than trying to reduce 2021's and utilize more fund balance next year, eating up what we're building this year.
Mm-hmm. I know you've got a lot on your plate, especially with the COVID and those funds that you're going to have to distribute with that, but would it be possible to get the what the growth is per business unit?
We can look at trying to pull that together, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, on that, with the I guess the final approval of the levy coming up in a month. I didn't realize it was coming up so quick. We've had some conversations after the preliminary levy of 4.97 regarding second assessment district, and we've identified a error that took place the year prior, I believe, which is causing quite a significant increase to the folks in the second, in the SAD district. And I'd like to discuss that prior, I guess, whether it be today or just to bring it to the attention of the other commissioners prior to the approval of the final levy, but of some options maybe for a gradual rebuild of those funds. And I think, Nick, you might be able to explain it better than I, as far as last year, there was some issues that it didn't get, the paperwork didn't get entered in time, and now this budget, we're trying to make all of that up in one swoop, which again has a fairly larger than I had anticipated impact on some of the residents in that area. So we could either kick around some options here, or we could come to a board meeting, whatever, prepared maybe with some of those options on how we could potentially relieve some of that impact to the folks in the second assessment. So however you want to deal with that, I know we've discussed maybe the potential of gradual rebuild of those funds. I think if we could maybe give Nick, at least I would like to see that impact, or maybe something come to us, or other potentials, opportunities for relief in this budget. I'm open to that as well, but there's not a lot of opportunities up there. Granted, I think there's only a couple spending line items that we're dealing with, but the fact that it was completely slipped through the cracks last year has left us in a bit of a pinch for those folks up there. So I just want to throw that out today, whether we want to discuss it further or have Nick bring some options to us. I'd like to at least entertain further discussion with that going forward.
Well, Doug, I'd like to know, you say significant in dollar amounts. What does that equate to?
I think the average resident in the second assessment district, it would be north of $200 a year increase to their property tax.
It is a lot.
So it's, Tim might have some more.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner Franzine and Commissioner Hoag. The levy in 2019 for the second assessment district was $67,812. In an administrative error, it was reduced for 2020 to $36,785. Right now, it's in the 2021 budget, restored to the higher level. Tim Bray is here and can talk to you about what the impacts of that are. This shouldn't happen. And so, as a result of an error, it's an error. And as long as we have a collection of 500 human beings here, we're going to make mistakes. Our processes need to catch those mistakes before they go in. And so I have had extended conversations with Debbie and Gary about what are the process changes we need to make so that this does not happen again. We did make some process changes a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, all that did was move the responsibility around internally, but did not create a second set of eyes. We need a second set of eyes on these. We also need someone, if we have a levy at $68,000 and it gets certified at $36,000, that someone's going to say, "Are you sure?" So I think we have put the processes in place that would prevent that from happening. The public policy question here is, okay, an error occurred. How would you like to get out of that error? And so right now, it is budgeted for it to return to the 67,000 level. There are multiple ways to do that. To Commissioner Franzine, to your question, the average The average home value in the second assessment district, I was kind of surprised, $187,000. The difference is about $258 for that average house. So if the value is higher, the difference is higher. If the value is lower, the difference is lower. You know how that works.
So my next question is has it always been up in the 67,000, and then last year it accidentally got put down? So they're used to paying the higher level rather than last year they got a break?
Yes, that is the case. Now, I want to back up just a little bit further. Commissioner Franzine, you've been around as long as I have, longer. You remember when we went up to the second assessment district and held a meeting up there and talked to the residents? Only 2 or 3 showed up, but what it was about was the maintenance of their roads. And so I do believe that at that time, we went from about 45,000 to 65. We've been hanging there ever since then. So yes,
That was a while
this is a
ago.
1-year dip.
Any other questions?
Nope, I think that's it. Thanks.
There are multiple strategies. I made sure staff was prepared to talk to you about it today if you wish. It's up to you.
Tim Bray, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I was asked to prepare just some comments about what the impact would be and if it was a slower recovery. I think that's, excuse me, that's what I think what the question is, whether to have the 1-year recovery or an extended period of time recovery. And we do, in the second assessment district, the roads are gravel. We have about 6.5 miles of gravel up there. And we have now gotten on a schedule, both with the second assessment district and the county roads, to gravel them every 5 years. And as you can imagine, that's the largest expenditure that they will have up there. The road and bridge levy is the largest part of their total levy. So the current schedule has us re-gravel in 2024. And that's in the 5-year plan that you approved back in April. Last year, we did gravel all of those. And that expenditure is about $150,000 each year. And if, in that decision to be able to do that every 5 years in the second assessment district was based on a levy of total levy about $67,000 per year, of which about $57,000 of that comes to the highway department in the road and bridge portion. If that is not able to be there as we had planned, the impact will be on that large gravel contract. So it will not be able to happen in 2024. And it would be moved out, and I'd have to have Nick help me to try to figure out which year that would happen. A number of years. And that not being able to do that in a timely manner will spend more on maintenance, and it'll just almost it could compound itself. We might spend a lot more on maintenance in those years, trying to keep it together until we can afford the full-blown re-graveling of all 6 miles. We're going to continue to do maintenance, snow plowing, blading of the roads, and those types of things. But the graveling will be the biggest impact. One thing to note is that, and Nick, you can maybe speak to this, is that the second assessment district operates in a deficit. So when we're currently in a deficit right now of I believe the number is $26,000. We're looking to actually go even farther as we kind of do some more billing of the second assessment district throughout the end of the year here. So it really compounds how we're going to do that gravel contract and just allowing them to continue in the deficit for longer. Maybe Nick can help me out on explaining that a little bit better, the deficits that they carry each year.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, back in 2019, the board decided to allow Second Assessment District to effectively borrow money from the funds in order to deliver the gravel contract. We were seeing the 2 years prior to that a lot of additional fees and trying to keep that in one road in particular to standards so that people could actually make it was passable, so that people could get to their homes, their properties, everything else. So we borrowed money. In essence, we allowed them to go negative. They're at the end of 19, we're at $51,000 in the hole. The long-term strategy was to borrow and slowly recover that. The recovery was going to occur that by 2030, we would be in a position where our minimum fund balance would always remain above that minimum going forward. The challenge is still the same, whether we would have made that mistake last year or not. We still have a progress that needs to be made over the long term to get us back to a positive position. Right now, the next gravel is projected for 2024 at $160,000. It will put them $121,000 in the hole. And that's with the current established levy request. It will take us until 2028 before we get to a positive position again. It will drop back into the hole in the next gravel cycle in 2029, approximately $70,000. And then we progress out to a point where it will be sustainable in the long term. But it'll take us till 2030 to get to that point at the current levy rate that we are proposing, and having a approximately 5% levy increase over the course of the next 8 years. It'll take us till 2028 of a 5%, and after that point, we'll be at proposed long-term 0% levy increase going forward. The levy will be enough to sustain long-term. If we modify it in 2021, those out years, the percentages will have to be higher in order for us to get to a point that by 2034, we actually are in a positive position. So the impact long-term is actually worse for the residents if we extend it out. But our goal is to get them back to a positive position. They are a smaller township with fewer residents, so it takes us a lot longer to rebuild that.
Mr. Hogan.
Well, and again, I think it's important to give them the roads that they're used to traveling today. We're not asking for any forgiveness in the year that the ball was dropped here. I think we're just asking for a plan to gradually rebuild that up rather than a one-year hard hit to those residents. Let's have maybe a multi-year plan. Given the arrangement that we've got in place with them now is kind of borrowing them money to keep their road conditions passable. I think if we come with, just an extension of that agreement, the folks would be quite pleased with that rather than the one-time hit. So,
one example that we did work up is a 15% levy increase. If we do a 15% levy increase for 2021, we will have to maintain a 15% levy increase through 2026. In 2027, we'll be at about 11%. And then in 28, 29, and 30, we'll be just under 5% levy increase in order to get us a drawn-out plan to get back to a positive position by 2033.
Okay, and that's what I guess I'm looking to have the board consider before we approve the final levy going forward.
Commissioner Franzine.
Well, I'm not sure that I agree with that, being that their levy was always 67,812, and last year they got a break. They would just go back to what they had been the previous years. So it wouldn't be any, last year was a real nice year for them, but it wouldn't, after that, it wouldn't be any different than it's always been if we'd go back up to there.
other than the fact we're trying to make up ground all in 1 year for them, and I just, I
Well,
don't
it
agree
always
with
was that way.
Well, that's your
Administrator
opinion.
Hool.
Mr. Chair, members of the
The
board,
fact.
think about that. Right now, the funding strategy was to get that to balance where they had the minimum fund balance by 2030. So you can think of it as, we still want to maintain the 2030 target. The percents that Nick just gave you for the levy increases that would be necessary if you recover in 2021, correct? That's what would be necessary to still hit that 2030 target. You also could choose that 2030 is going to move to 2031 or 2032. In my mind, your policy choice here is, do you want to restore the levy to where it was in 21? Do you want to restore the levy to where it was in 22? Or do you want to restore the levy to where it was in 23? How much we have to make up then? We're 36,000 short on the model today. If you restore the levy in 21, then it's just 36,000. If you restore the levy in 22, then it's going to be 36,000 plus half of 36,000. If you restore the levy in 2023, it's 36,000 plus a third, 2/3 of 36,000 plus 1/3 of 36,000. Those are the numbers that you're dealing with here. And so the swing here is probably a $100,000 swing between now and 2030. It gets spread out. So think of it, I think you can think of that policy choice as, when do you get there? And next year is an option, 2022 is an option, 2023. I could not suggest that you go out further than that.
So quick question, is this similar to the first assessment district when that issue came up a few years ago?
In a way, I suppose, we were not properly accounting for all of the costs associated with the first assessment district. And so when we started to do that, then the levy requirement for the first assessment district went up. In addition to that, we also put in place kind of a 5-year transportation improvement plan for the first assessment district, which we had not had prior to that. So I think that it's similar but not quite the same. This was a ministerial error. It was an administrative error. Those are going to happen, unfortunately. Trying to prevent them from happening again is important.
And when we started assessing FAD, we did that all at once.
We did do,
I mean, they hadn't been assessed at all, so we started assessing them.
yes, although I will say,
We just didn't do all the road part at once.
I think we did a stepped approach there. I think we did that over 2 or 3 years, but Tim, do you recall? Nick, do you recall?
Nick wasn't here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe it was a step. They didn't go all.
We
up at
could
once.
verify that for you,
Find out.
okay?
I know there was part of it that was step, but there was something that, I mean, it was a big, big jump.
It was
that
still a
first
big
year.
jump, yep, at once, as I'm sure you could attest.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we also do have a long-term strategy to increase the FAD over the course of the next few years. When we did put in that 5-year plan, that did occur while I was in highway. We did establish a long-term plan for don't quote me, but I think it was a 5% levy increase consistently
Per year.
to try and get us to that point that we could sustain that 5-year plan for the entire FAD. So there is a long-term strategy there too to have a growth in fund.
Maybe you could just present us some options and we'll see what the impact is and what the appetite is from the board. Okay?
Do you have any preferences on what options you'd like to see? Would you like to see us cost out TIMS where it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
I think that would be, really that, to me, is the only option, whether we do it in 1 or a 3-year cycle.
Yep, we'll work that out.
And then having the financial impact, to each of those would be, I think, important as well. So.
We'll work those up.
Nick, I would like to know the impact, the financial impact then, too, when we went from the 67 down to the 36, how much did they save?
I can have Land Services calculate that as well. Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
That is everything I have in my agenda. Are there any additional items?
Anything else? Commissioner Coring?
No, Mr. Chairman, just gathering information, that's all.
All right.
Plan that any better.
All right. We are finished with our budget meeting then. Thank you
right.
very much, Nick.
Thank you.